a sound or you'll wake them in the deepest part of the ancient forest. The flickering candlelight illuminates the faded pages of a story. Hedgehog still sits and tells the stories that people dare not tell before.
The Shadow Emperor and the Maid. Prologue. The Gilded Cage. In the heart of the opulent Serpentine Empire, the Sun Palace was a masterpiece of cruel beauty. Its spires clawed at a sky perpetually stained with the hues of sunset, as if the very heavens bled for the sins committed within. The air, thick with the scent of night-blooming jasmine and something darker, something metallic and old, was a constant reminder that beauty and decay were intimate lovers here. The Emperor, Lysander of the Obsidian Eyes, was a man carved from living shadow and quiet fury. At 28, he commanded armies that made continents tremble, and a single glance from his onyx eyes could freeze a man's soul. Yet, for all his power, his heart was a tomb, sealed shut after the death of his first and only love, Empress Alara, 5 years prior. The official story was about a sudden plague. The whispers in the servants' quarters spoke of a poisoned chalice, a gift from a jealous noble house. To maintain political harmony and produce an heir, Emperor Lysander had taken new consorts. There was Princess Lyn, of the Eastern Lotus clan, with her voice like wind chimes and a smile that never reached her serpentine eyes. Princess May, of the Northern Steel clan, whose beauty was as sharp and cold as the daggers she was rumored to wield. And Princess Sue, of the Western Pearl clan, a delicate, vaporous creature who seemed to be made of sea foam and sighs. They lived in a gilded cage, each vying for a sliver of the Emperor's affection, an affection he was no longer capable of giving. They believed his coldness was a challenge, his distance a game of power. They never guessed the truth, that the man they sought to conquer was already a ghost, haunting his own life. And I was the one who held his ghost together. My name is Kaelen. I was the shadow at his feet, the silent hand that poured his wine, the discreet presence that ensured the gears of his daily life turned without a sound. To the princess, I was merely the chief attendant, a eunuch of high rank, efficient and invisible. A piece of furniture with a heartbeat. They ordered me about, their voices laced with a condescending sweetness they reserved for things they considered beneath notice. Kaelen, fetch my shawl. Kaelen, adjust the lamps. Kaelen, tell the Emperor I am feeling unwell. They never saw the way his eyes, hard as obsidian, would flicker to me in a crowded room, a silent question in the depths. Are you well? They never noticed how his hand would briefly brush mine when I passed him a scroll, a touch that sent lightning through my veins. They were blind to the only truth that mattered in the Sun Palace. The Emperor did not love his princess. He loved me. Chapter 1, The Whispers in the Garden. It began, as it often did, in the garden of echoing petals, a place where flowers sang in the wind and the marble walkways remembered every footfall. I was attending to Princess Lyn as she held court by the koi pond, her laughter tinkling like broken glass. The Emperor dines with me tonight, she announced to her handmaidens, preening. He says my conversation is as refreshing as a mountain stream. I kept my eyes downcast, arranging a tray of honeyed dates. I had seen the Emperor's schedule. He was spending the evening in the war room, strategizing with his generals. He hadn't voluntarily dined with a princess in over a year. Later, as dusk bled into night, I found him not in the war room, but on his private balcony, staring at the constellation named for Alara. He didn't turn as I approached, but his posture shifted, the rigid line of his shoulders softening infinitesimally. They lie to each other, he said, his voice a low rumble that vibrated in my bones. They build palaces of falsehoods, and I am expected to reside in them. It is their only currency, Your Majesty, I replied softly, coming to stand beside him. I poured a single glass of deep red wine, not from the common decanters, but from a private stock I kept for him alone. He trusted no one else with his food or drink since Alara. He finally turned, his obsidian eyes capturing the starlight and swallowing it whole. And what is yours, Kaelen? What currency do you trade in? Loyalty, Your Majesty, I said, meeting his gaze. It was a dangerous thing to do, but with him, in these private moments, the rules of the world dissolved. Only loyalty. A ghost of a smile touched his lips, a sight rarer than a blue moon. Loyalty. He took the glass from my hand, his fingers lingering on mine. The contact was a brand. A more precious commodity than all the gold in this empire. He drank, then his smile faded. Princess May's father, Lord Tung, is consolidating power in the north. He thinks I do not see his ambition. He is a fool, then, I said. He is, Lysander agreed, his eyes turning cold. And fools must be reminded of their place. I am sending a tax levy that will strip his coffers bare. See that the decree is delivered by my personal guard. Let there be no mistake of its origin. It will be done, I nodded. This was our true dynamic. I was not just his servant, I was his confidant, the keeper of his secrets, the silent executor of his will. While the princesses played the games of fans and perfumes, we played a game of blood and power. As I turned to leave, his voice stopped me. Kaelen. Yes, Your Majesty. Do not let Princess Sue's new handmaiden near my chambers. She reports to Lin. I bowed. She will be assigned to the linen rooms by morning. This was our love, not whispered sweet nothings in moonlit gardens, but the quiet, brutal protection of each other in a court of vipers. It was a love built on a foundation of absolute trust, a fortress in a world of shifting sands. He was the emperor, and I was the slave who held his leash, and we both knew which of us was truly more powerful in the confines of our shared secret. Chapter 2. The Poison Thread. The Mid-Autumn Festival was a spectacle of forced merriment. Lanterns shaped like mythical beasts floated in the air, and the halls echoed with the hollow laughter of courtiers. The princesses were resplendent in their silks, each trying to outshine the other. I was overseeing the service, a constant, unobtrusive flow ensuring the emperor's cup was never empty, his plate never barren. My eyes, however, were everywhere. I saw Princess May's sharp gaze following Lord Tung, who was pale and sweating under the weight of the emperor's new taxes. I saw Princess Lin's false smile as she tried to engage Lysander in conversation, only to be met with polite, glacial indifference. It was Princess Sue who concerned me most. She looked paler than usual, her hands trembling slightly. She had been spending an unusual amount of time with a new alchemist from the Western Isles, a man with fingers stained yellow and a penetrating gaze. As the evening wore on, a gift was presented to the emperor, a magnificent tapestry from Princess Sue, woven with threads of gold and silver, depicting the great dragons of legend. It is beautiful, Princess Sue, Lysander said, his voice devoid of warmth. You have my thanks. He made to run his hand over the woven silk, a perfunctory gesture, when a scent, faint but unmistakable, hit my nostrils. Midnight bloom, a flower whose pollen, when combined with the oils of human skin, induced a slow, creeping paralysis, starting with the limbs and eventually stopping the heart. It was the same poison rumored to have been on the chalice that killed Alara. My body moved before my mind could process the danger. As the emperor's fingers were an inch from the tapestry, I stumbled, a calculated, clumsy fall, knocking over a giant vase of lilies. Water and flowers cascaded across the marble floor, the crash echoing through the hall like a thunderclap. All conversation ceased. Hundreds of eyes turned to me. Clumsy fool, Princess Lin shrieked, jumping back from the water. The emperor's hand froze, then withdrew. His eyes, sharp and knowing, snapped to me, then to the tapestry, then to Princess Sue's horrified face. I was on my knees, profusely apologizing. Forgive me, Your Majesty. A moment of dizziness, I am so sorry. The moment was broken. The spell of the gift was shattered. Guards rushed to clean the mess. Under the cover of the chaos, I caught the emperor's eye and gave a minute, almost imperceptible shake of my head. His expression did not change, but a storm gathered in his eyes. He turned to Princess Sue. A thoughtful gift. Have it placed in the Hall of Ancestors for all to admire. A death sentence. No one would touch it there. It would hang, a beautiful, deadly monument to her treachery. Later that night, in the absolute silence of his bedchamber, he faced me. The rage coming off him was a physical force. "Midnight Bloom," he hissed, his voice trembling with a fury I had never heard before. "She used the same poison. She is a pawn," I said, my own heart still hammering. "The alchemist is the key. And behind him, likely, one of the other princesses. May, perhaps, to remove a rival and frame Sue." He grabbed my shoulders, his grip bruising. "You put yourself in the line of fire. You made yourself a target. If anyone suspects you acted with purpose, let them suspect," I whispered, placing my hands over his. "My life is yours. It has always been yours. To lose you is to lose my own breath. If my death is the price for your safety, it is a price I pay willingly." The anger in his eyes melted, replaced by a raw, agonizing vulnerability I alone was permitted to see. He pulled me into an embrace, his face buried in my hair. He was the most powerful man in the world, and in that moment, he clung to me as if I were the only solid thing in a universe of quicksand. "I cannot lose you, Kaelen," he murmured, his voice ragged. "You are the only thing that is real. The only thing that is mine." We stood like that for a long time, the emperor and his servant, bound by a secret love more powerful than any throne. He did not speak the words, "I love you." He didn't need to. His terror at the thought of my loss was a louder declaration than any poet could ever compose. Chapter 3, The Web of Knives. The investigation into the tapestry was, publicly, a quiet affair. Princess Sue, consumed by guilt and fear, was found drowned in her bath 3 days later. The court called it a tragic accident. Lysander and I knew it was a silencing. The alchemist disappeared from the palace records, as if he had never existed. But the attempt had broken the fragile peace. The court was now a battlefield, and the knives were coming out in the open. Princess Lynn and Princess May began a silent war, their factions clashing in the corridors, their spies turning up dead in the moat. I was the one navigating this web of knives. My position as chief attendant gave me unparalleled access. I heard everything, saw everything. I used my authority to reassign servants, planting my own eyes and ears in every crucial household. I knew which guard was bribed, which cook was poisoned, which lady-in-waiting carried secret messages. One evening, I intercepted a missive from Princess May to her father. "The shadow servant is a problem," it read. "The emperor trusts him too much. He sees things. He must be removed. An accident. A fall from the eagle's tower." I showed the scroll to Lysander that night. His face, illuminated by a single candle, was a mask of cold, murderous calm. "So," he said, his voice dangerously soft, "they have finally seen you. Not as a servant, but as a threat." "It was inevitable, Your Majesty," I replied, though a chill ran down my spine. The eagle's tower was a long, long fall. He stood and walked to a chest at the foot of his bed. From it, he drew not a jeweled dagger or a sword of state, but a simple, unadorned stiletto, its blade dull and gray. It was a weapon of practicality, of silent, intimate killing. He pressed the cool hilt into my palm. "Take it, Your Majesty, I am not an assassin." "You are my hand," he corrected me, his eyes burning with intensity. "And I am ordering you to protect what is mine. That includes yourself. If she sends someone for you, you will not hesitate. Do you understand?" The weight of the dagger in my hand felt like a sacrament. It was not just a weapon, it was an acknowledgement of my true role. I was his shield and his knife in the dark. The attempt came 2 nights later. As I crossed a deserted courtyard, 2 figures emerged from the shadows, their movements swift and professional. They were not palace guards, they were northern mercenaries, hired for the discretion and cruelty. My heart leaped into my throat, but my training, the secret training Lysander had insisted I receive for years, took over. As the first man lunged, I sidestepped, the stiletto appearing in my hand as if by magic. It was not about strength, but precision. I plunged the blade into the side of his neck, just as my instructor had taught me. He gurgled and fell. The second man hesitated, shocked by the swift, lethal response from a mere servant. That hesitation was his death. I didn't fight with honor, I fought to survive. I kicked a handful of gravel into his eyes and, as he staggered back, blind and swearing, I drove the stiletto up under his ribcage, into his heart. He collapsed, his dead weight pulling me down with him. I lay there for a moment, panting, the coppery smell of blood filling my nostrils, the warmth of it soaking my robes. I felt no triumph, only a cold, hollow horror. I had crossed a line. I was no longer just a keeper of secrets. I was a killer. When I reported to Lysander, covered in blood that was not my own, he didn't flinch. He simply pulled me into his arms, holding me tightly as I trembled. "It is done," he whispered into my hair. "You are safe." But we both knew it was a lie. Nothing was safe. The war had been declared. Chapter 4, The Unraveling. The disappearance of two mercenaries did not go unnoticed. Princess May grew desperate. Her father, Lord Tongue, began moving troops to the southern border, a training exercise that looked suspiciously like the prelude to a rebellion. The palace was a pressure cooker about to explode. Whispers of coup, of assassination, filled the air. The princess, realizing the emperor was not a prize to be won but a king to be overthrown, began to form an uneasy alliance. Lysander, however, was not idle. The quiet, grieving emperor finally showed the world why he was called the obsidian-eyed reaper. Using the intelligence I gathered from the servants' network, he struck with brutal precision. Lord Tongue's key allies were arrested on charges of treason. His supply lines were mysteriously cut. A fire, of questionable origin, destroyed his main armory. The gilded cage was now a fortress under siege, and I was the keeper of its keys. The final confrontation happened on the night of the blood moon. It was an old superstition, a night when the veil between worlds was thin and dark deeds were done. I knew from a scullery maid, whose brother was a guard in May's household, that it was the night they planned to move. I went to Lysander. "It is tonight. They will come for you in your chambers." He was dressed not in his silken robes, but in the black, practical leathers of a soldier. He looked like the warrior king he truly was. "Let them come," he said, his voice like grinding stones. "The trap is set." He had dismissed his personal guard, creating the illusion of vulnerability. The halls were eerily quiet. We waited in the darkness of his chamber, the only light coming from the blood-red moon outside the window. They came not as a horde, but as a whisper. Princess May herself led them, 5 of her most loyal, dead-eyed guards. They slipped through the secret passage behind the tapestry, a passage I had conveniently forgotten to have properly sealed during the last renovations. As the first guard entered the room, Lysander moved. He was a blur of darkness. His sword, a simple, unadorned length of deadly steel, flashed in the crimson light. The first guard fell without a sound. The second followed. May stood there, her beautiful face contorted into a mask of hatred. "You cold, heartless monster," she spat. "You deserve to rot in the hell you have made of this empire. You sought to steal a throne that was never yours to take," Lysander replied, his voice calm. "You tried to poison me with pretty gifts and lies. You threatened what is mine." His emphasis on the last word was a declaration of war all its own. He disarmed her last 2 guards with effortless, brutal efficiency, leaving them wounded and groaning on the floor. Then he stood before May. "My father will burn this palace to the ground," she screamed. "Your father," Lysander said coldly, "was found dead in his camp an hour ago." His heart gave out. A tragic accident. The fight drained from her. She understood. She had lost. It was then that Princess Lynn appeared in the doorway, drawn by the commotion. She took in the scene, the dead guards, the defeated May, the emperor standing like an avenging god, and her face went pale. "Your Majesty," she gasped, "I came to warn you. I heard there was a plot." Silence, Lysander commanded, and the word had the finality of a slamming tomb door. He looked from Maid to Lyn, his obsidian eyes holding a judgment that was absolute. You were my wives in name. You shared my table and my title. But you sought my power, not my heart. You conspired, you poisoned, you threatened the one thing in this wretched world that I hold dear. His gaze flickered to me, standing in the shadows, and in that look was everything we were, everything we had fought for. He turned back to the two women. For treason against the crown, the sentence is death. He did not call the guards. He looked at me. Kaelen. My breath caught. This was the final test. The final step into the darkness. He was not ordering an execution. He was asking me to share the burden of his throne, to stain my hands alongside his, to be his equal in blood as I was in his heart. I thought of the mercenary, the stiletto in his heart. I thought of the midnight bloom. I thought of a lifetime of silent love and silent war. I stepped out of the shadows. I picked up a fallen guard's sword. It was heavy, alien in my hand. Princess Lyn began to sob. May stared at me with a dawning, horrified understanding. You, she whispered. The servant. I did not speak. There were no words for this. I looked at Lysander. He gave a single, grave nod. And I did what needed to be done. Epilogue. The shadow on the throne. The official story was a tragic one. Princess May, in a fit of madness, had attempted to assassinate the emperor and had killed Princess Lyn before being slain by the brave chief attendant, Kaelen, who tragically succumbed to his own wounds later that night. A state funeral was held. The court mourned, but in the dead of night, a figure moved through the catacombs deep beneath the Sun Palace. Emperor Lysander, clad in a simple traveler's cloak, descended into the darkness until he reached a hidden chamber, warded with ancient, forgotten magic. Inside, a fire burned in a hearth. I stood before it, alive and well, the title of Chief Attendant Kaelen, buried with the empty coffin they had paraded through the streets. He threw back his hood, and for the first time in the presence of another, his face was not that of an emperor, but simply of a man. A man weary of crowns and thrones. It is done, he said. The empire is secure. My cousin rules as regent. He is a good man. He will not seek us. We had planned it for years, this escape. The only way to be free was to die. To let the world believe the emperor and his loyal servant were gone, victims of the court's treachery. He crossed the room and took my face in his hands. No more titles. No more shadows. No more knives in the dark. Just us. In a small, secluded valley, far from the politics and poison of the Serpentine Empire, a simple stone cottage stands by a lake. Two men live there. One tends the garden, his hands, once accustomed to holding scrolls and daggers, now caring for roses and herbs. The other, a man with eyes that no longer look like obsidian but hold the soft light of the sun on water, hunts and fishes. They are not emperor and servants. They are Lysander and Kaelen. Their love is no longer a secret buried in the heart of a palace, but a quiet, open thing, sung by the wind in the trees and reflected in the still surface of the lake. The world believes they are dead, but in the death, they found the only life that ever truly mattered, a life where the man who owned an empire finally became the master of his own heart, and the servant who held that heart finally became his king. And in the quiet of their evenings, as they sit by their own fire, they know the darkest fairy tales can sometimes have the happiest of endings, forged not in gold and glory, but in shadow, blood, and a love that was willing to bring an empire to its knees to be free.
If you feel a chill down your spine, don't worry. They're just standing behind you, listening with you. Thank you for daring to enter the world of fairy tales of Nim. We'll see you again next night, if you're still around.